Good afternoon, everyone. We're in the special business meeting of the District of Squamish on Tuesday, February 27th. Halfway Squalum, Quees Tlasquehomish, Awarenla. Welcome to the traditional territory of the Squamish Nation. There is an agenda in front of Council. Looking for a motion to adopt the agenda. Moved by Councillor Kent, second by Councillor Elliott. All those in favor?
The
amended agenda, yes, with the resolutions that was passed this afternoon. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. We do have our guest for item 4.2 here from BCIT, and looking to see if council is okay with moving this agenda item to the front of the agenda. Okay, so we're going to just switch it up a little bit. Sorry, guys.
I have a declared conflict on this matter.
Okay, thank you. So whenever you're welcome, Kim, and whenever you're ready, Kate, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. My name is Kate Mulligan. I'm the Economic Development Officer for the District of Squamish, and I'm joined today by the Dean of Applied Research, Kim Dodo, from BCIT.
Welcome.
Today we're going to be presenting an opportunity for Council's consideration. The title is Resilient Power, and it's related to the BCIT microgrid. So the objective of the presentation is to provide an overview of the proposed project for your consideration, as well as seek direction from Council regarding the proposed resolutions. And those resolutions are that the District of Squamish authorized an application to the Natural Resources of Canada Smart Demonstration Deployment Program for the implementation of a smart microgrid for resilient power for disaster recovery. And that the District of Squamish enter into a memorandum of understanding between District of Squamish and BCIT, Smart Microgrid Applied Research Team, substantially in the form attached to the report Council for Economic Development from Economic Development dated February 20th, 2018. So to provide a little bit of background about the project and the recommended resolutions. Initially, we got together with BCIT as part of discussions that related to potential partnerships and collaboration, in particular with the Smart Cities application that the District of Squamish is exploring at present. We met in early February. Gary Buxton and myself went to visit BCIT to tour a smart microgrid application that's installed at BCIT's campus. And as a result of that, they presented an opportunity to apply for funding as part of an NRCan funding envelope. So BCIT's SMART team is a leader in renewable energy R&D projects. And they push the envelope for integrating renewable energy generation and storage, electrical vehicle charging infrastructure, and smart energy management. So the opportunity with NRCan, they actually they've announced in, I think it was the 2017 federal budget, $820 million worth of funding that was related to the development of clean energy programs. Of that, $100 million was specifically to support next generation smart grid storage and clean electricity technology demonstration and deployment projects. And so the program goal of the NRCan Smart Grid Demonstration Program is to accelerate the development of smart grids in order to reduce GHG emissions and generate economic and social benefits. The electricity sector accounts for, and I'm going to get this wrong, how many? 78 megatons, or 11% of greenhouse gas emissions in Canada, and smart grids are seen as a key enabler for GHG mitigation as they increase the hosting capacity of renewable generation, improve asset utilization, and increase resiliency. Further, GHG reductions are enabled when energy systems such as smart grids are integrated with other energy systems such as transportation and heat to provide economic clean energy solutions for customers. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Kim, and he's going to give you a little bit more background about the BCIT Oasis microgrid that's located on campus and how the application could be considered in the context of Squamish.
Okay, so thank you for having me here today. OASIS is an acronym. It stands for Open Access to Sustainable Intermittent Sources of Energy. And what a microgrid is a smart way of actually distributing energy that is either generated locally or stored locally in a way that manages a number of different aspects. So you manage the generation, you manage the storage, you manage distribution. And it can be used for a number of different things. At BCIT, we use it as a research project and as a demonstration project for electric vehicle. It also is part of our sustainability program for reducing greenhouse gases. In this case, the opportunity for Squamish is more about the resiliency of the city and recovering or sustaining your resources going forward during an emergency situation. So if you look at the way climate is changing and the way populations are, a lot of the disasters have a severe problem with maintaining their electrical energy supplies. So if you look at Haiti, you look at Jamaica, you look at most of the areas that have suffered, Dominican Republic, over the last few years, it has been due to the lack of electrical and energy resources and the lack of the ability to get resources to those places. So if you look at a lot of these places, they had backup diesel generators, they had various other things, but they couldn't get the gasoline to them because or the diesel to them because the roads had been destroyed, the transmission lines had been destroyed, and it's kind of a bootstrapping process. Without the energy to get you started, you can't actually recover. So what is OASIS? It's a stable power supply that's critical for disaster recovery. So if you look at the OASIS project at BCIT, we have and I don't want to get too much into the actual details because every installation will be slightly different. One in Squamish would have to be tailored for your needs as opposed to exactly duplicating what we have at BCIT. But we have a solar photovoltaic energy generation system that feeds into a battery storage system with a smart grid or a smart energy management system that allows us to distribute the energy to a variety of things. As simple as the lighting systems in the parking lots to as important as the backup for our health center, which is our emergency operations assembly point and things like that. It's different than a diesel generation backup system. If you look at a diesel generation backup system for emergency recovery, it's there when you need it, but it's a lot of infrastructure that is sitting there doing nothing when it's not being used. The OASIS grid project and what we would be looking at for the Squamish area is something that will actually supply power and reduce your greenhouse gas emissions by substituting clean power for other uses, even when there's not an emergency. So the power is there, the backup and the reserve is there if you need it, but on a regular basis your infrastructure is actually generating clean energy for you and delivering services to the city. Yeah, move to the next slide. So what we would be looking at for the city, District of Squamish is a system that would allow you to maintain your emergency operations center, to maintain communication systems for electric vehicles that would be the mobility of your first responders. It would allow you to actually go through and monitor and plan, run simulations and disaster exercises so that you can prepare in advance for what was going to happen. And as I mentioned before, when you're not in emergency mode, the power generation system returns benefits and cost savings directly to the city. I can answer more technical questions about things if you have it.
You want to answer technical questions now? Or?
And it's up to you.
Okay.
I'm happy to field the technical questions now.
Sure. Yeah, Councillor Scott?
Thanks. So I totally agree with everything you said, I disagree. However, our natural resource Canada map basically puts us in a black zone. We get rain 192 days of the year. So the storage system has to be enormous, and you have a 500 megawatt system here. But we are, if you go around, we don't have solar on our roofs. We are not solar ready in a lot because we actually are in the black area of the solar map.
Right.
Will that be looked at in the grant application?
Absolutely. If you look at the first phase of the grant application, it's a feasibility study to see what will work. So, like I said, I don't want to get too much into details of what we have at BCIT, because if you look at our grid system there, the main aspect of Oasis is a solar generation system, but we also have thermal. We also have other generation systems, wind as well. So one of the first things we would look at is what makes sense for you. So because it's grid tied, because you're feeding power in and out of the grid, even if you don't have a lot of solar, you can still charge the batteries so that they are available if you would need them in an emergency state. But we could do wind, we could do run of river if you had to, we could do geothermal. There's many ways of generating the energy. What's important about the grid is the management and the ability to supply and maintain the energy at a later date. So solar is only one aspect, and the first part of it is the feasibility. So I say what works in this community.
Can I just
And it could be multiple sources. Too.
Oh, absolutely. As I say, at BCIT we have wind power, we have steam generated turbines, which takes the excess steam from our education programs. We have solar. We haven't got run of river yet, but we do have a creek through the property that we would be looking at. So, yeah, multiple sources integrated into it.
Yeah, follow up, Councillor Strong and Councillor Kent.
Thanks. So that's through the feasibility study, it would look at all our possible generations, because we have hydro up here.
Yes.
So why wouldn't we just charge the batteries with hydro, and then it's no cost whatsoever to the community or to the...
And that is one of the things that you can do. And so the energy management system can look at the costs for each type of generation, and when it's more advantageous to charge from hydro, you would charge off the grid. When it's more advantageous to charge off of one of the others. The advantage is if you are disconnected from your grid, however, you still have the ability to generate power, either wind or solar, when you're disconnected from the grid. So even though you have a certain amount of battery storage, when that runs out, if your grid is disconnected from your hydro, you can't recharge that battery. But if you've got solar, wind, or something else, you can actually recharge it when you're disconnected off the main grid.
Excellent. I'm interested in the feasibility study just to see what is available with newer. I think it's always worth reassessing new technologies, and as you know, with solar, it may become more available with newer technologies as well, and a broader spectrum. So.
The prices come down, and the efficiency of the solar cells. If you look at Germany, which is a northern country, they are the world's leaders in producing solar energy. They actually produce more than they can use internally. So it's yes, we are in a dark area, but it's not. Doesn't mean that solar still couldn't have a role to play.
I agree. Okay, thank you for answering this.
And I'm sure Kate has shared this with you. We did a little bit of analysis on potential sources through our neighborhood energy utility analysis about five or 6 years ago, so yeah. I'm sure she shared that with you. Councillor Grant.
On the subject of batteries, what type are you using?
Well, we're currently using lithium-ion batteries that are supplied by Panasonic. It's a specific design that BCIT developed to work with the microgrid. Again, not limited to a specific technology. Lithium-ion has its advantages. It does have some disadvantages in terms of you can't get them too cold. So in some areas, lead-acid car battery technology, and there are other new nickel metal hydride and various other technologies coming up. Again, those things would be addressed in the feasibility study to say, okay, how much power do you need for what length of time? What's the optimum temperature you're going to run at? What's the kind of load discharge that you're going to have? All of those factors come into play when deciding on what the battery type you're going to use. But we have access to multiple different kinds.
I'm interested in the feasibility study too.
And Kim, all of those are commercially available components
yes.
and vendor agnostic. So
absolutely,
the design of it has been considered in that way.
One of our main points at BYLAWS in all of our research work is one, we are vendor agnostic. We are not tied to any particular vendor. And all of the results of our studies are available to the public either through workshops and various other stuff. So there is a lot of data and a lot of information that's also accessible to the council if they want to do some more background reading into the project as it stands.
Excellent. Any more technical questions about it? Yeah, concerns?
Thank you. I'm just trying to get my head around this. So if we had maybe a solar array on top of Brandon Park as one of the examples, and it was feeding power on a day-to-day basis into the grid, and we're getting credit for that. Disaster comes, and we want to use that solar array now to power emergency operations, etc. Do we have to have a separate set of wiring? How do you throw the switch?
No, it's called islanding. Basically, what you do is you adapt the power connections within one of your substations. So there will be an existing substation or an existing feeder to the building that you want to have the emergency power for. The energy management system will monitor the incoming feed and it will monitor the outgoing power. And if it determines that the power coming into the building from the normal BC Hydro grid is no longer there, it literally flips a switch on its own and it islands the building and supplies power back through the battery. So it's not really requiring two sets of wires. You basically just need some smart switches, which are industry standard now that you'll find in most substation upgrades. It's the ones that BC Hydro use. For us at BCIT, there's a specific substation that fits the one building that we feed our power back through, and it is a single switch operation that islands that building. So it takes a little bit of modification of the switching, but no running second sets of wiring or anything like that.
Okay, let's go on.
Yeah, I can reach that.
So we're actually going to move into the project considerations. And of course, if you have more questions for Kim about the technical considerations, we can also field those. Given the short timeline of this opportunity, district staff, we've developed a situational analysis and performed a preliminary needs assessment and cost-benefit analysis. I will mention that it's specified in the report, but the deadline for application is very, very soon, March 4th, which is Sunday.
Who makes a deadline on Sunday?
I'm not sure, NRCan does, I guess. So concurrently, we've been exploring the requirements around the application, and BCIT has been actually working on an application should we move forward. As part of this, Kim did mention that the feasibility assessment is really the first part, which would take place in year one. And it's a requirement should an application be made and funding awarded. And we wanted to stress that point because we feel that there's still many questions on the part of staff and as well BCIT that we need to explore, and the feasibility assessment would allow us to address those questions. Based on the needs assessment, currently Squamish emergency response requires 72 hours of power. Our critical locations include the Fire Hall, Municipal Hall, Brennan Park Recreation Center, which serves as a registration center currently, district operations, and the Public Safety Building, which is the RCMP and EOC. Right now, we have backup power, which is provisioned primarily by gas, propane, or diesel generators. In fact, most of our facilities are propane. We do have gas, so propane at district fire halls and wastewater treatment plant. We've got a diesel generator at the Public Safety Building and piped natural gas generators at Municipal Hall and Brennan Park Recreation Center. So generators are not used unless required. Our additional diesel is stored at the operations yard, and propane is stored on site where the generator is located. So right now, we kind of looked at it from the perspective of what do we have today and what could be, what could the future look like for the District of Squamish in terms of our emergency response. And we suggested that if there was an emergency response center that served more than one need, that would be the best opportunity for this technology. And should the near finalized district real estate strategy and facility strategy prioritize the construction of such a facility within 5 years, perhaps this proposal could offset some operational and select electrical provisioning costs. So that's one consideration. We also looked at the idea of our current facility and how it serves emergency response needs. So Brennan Park, as I mentioned, serves as the reception center, and then there's the public safety building, which is our active EOC and RCMP. So a continuous supply of green power for emergency response and ongoing power to provide operational cost savings may be a benefit for both of those buildings. And in addition, resulting infrastructure, if we were to do solar PV, could potentially provide additional amenities for our residents. So in terms of,
Can I?
yeah, of course.
When staff was doing their analysis of this, did they think about pumps for our diking drainage systems, as well as wastewater treatment and that type of thing?
We did explore some considerations around wastewater treatment plant. We didn't look at pumps. We didn't get into that much detail. We kind of tried to isolate our #1 priority areas that we felt were of utmost importance, and these were the priority areas that were identified. The feasibility study could help explore that further and identify those areas. So,
Kim might be able to confirm it. I almost guarantee that those pumps are pretty big. They'd probably drain a PV system almost instantly. They're way too energy hungry to run on this sort of system.
So we have to ensure that we have those backups.
Those need a diesel generator. Yeah, they're energy hogs.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just wondering about the amount to generate the 500, to actually fill the batteries, the size of a solar array in a low solar area.
If you look at the solar array, we have there's a picture. We also have some. There, it's about the equivalent of 4 rows of parking for about 35 vehicles in each row. So it's not a huge amount of area. And
Vancouver.
In Vancouver, we're not in a truly high sun zone either. If you look at the amount of solar energy that's landing on the panels, there's more than enough energy coming out. It's nominally a 250 kilowatt generator system. So if you look at a 500 kilowatt hour battery system, it's basically 2 hours of full sun to charge this sort of thing.
Right. And can I just follow up? So when I look at solar, I always think about the cost and the length of time that they're going to be around before they do get recycled now, I believe. The photovoltaics get recycled.
They get ground up. They're mostly silicon, so they get ground up and turned to sand.
And this will all be evaluated through the feasibility?
This will all be evaluated through the
But
feasibility.
is solar pretty much the road that we're going down at this point? Like
We don't know for sure. Again, solar is likely to be a component of it, but wind would also be probably something that we would look at the same time. It's really hard to say at this point in time.
We just finished a wind study. There was a group that did a wind study on their ocean front here, and we don't have consistent winds.
Well, no one has consistent anything.
Right.
That's why you look at balancing
That's why you have
between
multiple.
grid supplied solar and wind, and that's what the feasibility
Right,
study
dusty,
has to
it's
look
hard
at.
to.
In terms of the lifespan of the solar cells, you're looking significant time periods, 25 to 50 years. Yeah. It's the lifetime of the solar panels is not typically an issue. They will outlast all of us.
All right, continue on.
Just for payback.
Yeah.
So I will stress that this has been a very much initial assessment by staff in terms of the application or the potential application in Squamish. The feasibility study is really what we're stressing as a must-do in terms of understanding the full opportunity, and that's what we're recommending. In terms of some other considerations, for instance, in the 2018 capital plan for Brennan Park, it includes an electrical switchgear upgrade of $190,000 and a new backup gas generator of $115,000. This could potentially be offset by funding. Again, we need to look at the feasibility of that. And we also looked at some potential cost savings. Again, those are dependent on the rates. Right now, I know that BC Hydro is considering a multi-tiered cost system, which would look at time of use, multi-tier pricing, and peak penalties. So the one advantage of this system is that it enables demand response, so load shifting and peak shaving capabilities. So in future, if there were penalties put on for peak usage, the district would be able to load the power at different times at off-peak periods. So in terms of the consumption, the calculation, we received the consumption statistics for each building for 2017. We based it on the costs in 2017, and then we basically calculated what the potential annual savings is, which doesn't amount to a significant portion. It's 9% of total cost, but the objective of this system is to provide resilient power in the event of emergency, as opposed to provide cost savings. So as an alternative to exploring this, district emergency response facilities could enhance their fossil fuel reserve, upgrade their equipment as needed in preparation for a significant event. The one caveat in that is that district generators depend on the continued supply of gas and availability of diesel. The proposed budget for the application is $10 million. The funding sources, if awarded, would be $5 million from NRCan through a contribution agreement, $2 million in-kind value from BCIT for their resources and expertise, and $3 million in-kind value from the District of Squamish. The $3 million in-kind value is comprised of $160,000 per fiscal for four fiscals for incremental staffing resources equivalent to 1.2 FTE. That would be to undertake the project management, the civil work, the electrical work, and the municipal planning that's required. And in consideration of the strategic workforce planning, project oversight could be provided by a project manager at 1 FTE, with electrical expertise provided by electrical technician at 0.2 FTE.
Just for people
Of course.
who may not know the lingo, you're talking about X amount per year
Yes.
for 4 years.
Yes. Yes, a total of 640 if my calculations are correct. The other in-kind valuation is $1.18 million over 2 fiscals, and that is comprised of existing district assets, infrastructure, and real estate. The funding provided by NRCan could offset potentially the capital plan expenditure that was set for 2018, but that is really dependent on the feasibility of the project. Project funding, I think it can be awarded as early as April 2018. Based on discussions with BCIT, it's more realistic that it would be in late 2018. So the project would most likely begin in 2019.
I just like you to clarify in layman's terms so people understand what the 1.18 million
What it
in
is,
kind
means.
we're not spending $1.2 million.
No, we are not. It's not an outlay of cash. It's actually valuing our existing infrastructure and assets and land that would be used for the project. So existing infrastructure comprises of the electrical network, our power distribution system, the grid protection components, the receiving station. And then the additional funding would be to implement the technology and integrate it to those existing systems and land.
Thank you.
Do we have staff capacity to write another grant? We've got Smart Cities grant, we've got a multitude of grants, and I brought up capacity issues before. I want to make sure that we have staff capacity to work to divert our attention to another grant.
Go ahead.
So the actual application is due March 4th, and BCIT is developing the application on our behalf, and we are supplying some information to support the grant writing, but it is in the hands of BCIT right now. We are required to submit the grant, however, so there will be that administration requirement as well as process, you know, the grant if we were successful.
Awesome, thank you, Kate.
Councillor Carr.
Thanks. It looks great to me.
Are we finished?
Not quite done yet.
Okay.
Close.
Is it a 4 and 2? Is that a 6-year deal, or does it just keep going?
So the total funding envelope is over a 4-year period. And there is the possibility that the project would run late and we could ask for an extension, but the funding is for a 4-year period. Once fully operational, the system does not need pervasive monitoring. Having someone listed as a contact would be sufficient if something goes wrong. And it delivers an automated message to the designated contact asking for help. But beyond the $10 million envelope, we would have to consider the ongoing maintenance and running of the...
But our portion is $2 million?
Our portion is $3 million of in-kind value, which would consist of the resource requirements for staff to provide the expertise of their time. And we've said that that's incremental to our existing budget, and then 1.18 million per fiscal, and that's of our existing assets, real estate and infrastructure.
And can you refresh my memory on how much you're going to save?
The cost savings are less than, at this point, less than 17,000 based on 2017 hydro costs. But that is all dependent on the rates of hydro at the given time. And also, it depends on the outcome of the project and how much energy we're actually able to store and generate. Would that be correct?
It is, but you also have to realize that in addition to the amount that you're saving in actual energy costs, you're getting an influx of $5 million worth of value, cash in basically from Natural Resources Canada to develop infrastructure that you wouldn't otherwise have for mostly in kind and very small incremental outlay of.
Well, I like the idea of working with BCIT. And I like the fact that there's some grant money out there. I mean, it's kind of a little bit down low, but I'm looking at that. It's working.
Let's get to the end of the
I
presentation.
thought you were over.
Nope.
I will add also that the benefit of, should there be a disaster, there would be potential financial cost recovery savings that would be realized as a result of it. Unknown at this time, I am not really sure. But that would be another potential financial
Ask
aspect.
Puerto Rico how it would benefit them today.
Yeah. Okay, let's get back to it. I think I already said this point, but does it require extensive monitoring? One other important point is the NRCan contribution agreement does not contractually obligate the district to complete the project should it not be viable. So we'll do the full feasibility assessment and with assurance from BCIT, you know, if things just don't work, then we're not going to continue. We're not forced to spend the outlay of cash.
Yeah, it's a reimbursement program, so that if we go through the feasibility study at the end of year 1 and go, this just does not make sense, then we'd be asking NRCan to reimburse us for further expenditures down the road. So there is no financial obligation.
In terms of implementation, this is the last slide. Year 1 is a feasibility and audit, system design, simulation of the solution. We decide, are we going to go, no go. Year 2, purchasing of the required components, validation of each section using BC microgrid, start of the civil work in the second half of the year. Year 3, we would continue with civil work, the installation commissioning of the solution in Squamish. And year 4 would be the validation and qualification of test cases applied over the commissioned assets in Squamish. So that's the plan, and obviously based on the feasibility and the implementation, it could deviate slightly in terms of timing. And that is the end of the presentation. Thank you very much, and if you have questions.
Yeah, I have one question, and I'll go to Councillor Sparrow and Councillor Parr. With regard to the in-kind from a staff point of view, curious about what type of skills this person would have, and are there opportunities to have student interns, for example, from BCIT that could step into that kind of role and become a great learning experience, obviously for them, an educational experience, but also fill that knowledge gap that we may have currently in our staff?
Absolutely. The skills vary. It's not, when talking about 1.2 or 1.4 in kind, it's a mix of different people from different areas. So you're going to have planning people, you're going to have electrical, you're going to have civil, you're going to have a whole bunch of environmental people, various skill sets from various areas. And yes, there is certainly opportunity for students to participate in not only the design, but in terms of the training aspects for upgrading the local skills. Even as part of the staff here working on the project will actually be a very valuable professional development exercise for the existing staff within the District of Squamish that will end up working on the project.
And through the feasibility study, will we be, and maybe this is a question through to the CAO, understanding where the gaps are and how we fill the needs as laid out in the MOU and in the project?
Mayor Husband, through you, I do believe that would be part of the feasibility, and at this time, in terms of staff support during that period, we've looked at it with BCIT and through Kate, and there will be, referrals to and talking to staff within our current capacity, but we believe we can handle that, and then, the feasibility would indicate what we need going forward, and we would include that in our budgeting and staff projections.
Councillor Spell, Councillor Kerr.
So you're saying that the entire grid system, whatever infrastructure is chosen, whether it be geothermal or whatever it ends up being, is paid for by Natural Resources Canada through
For the most part, you basically get $5 million worth of funding that goes, some of that will end up in staffing costs and various other things, but a good portion of that will be going to cover the cost of the actual infrastructure. So again, depending on what we're putting in, but that is generally the idea that the in-kind covers the contribution or the matching contribution, and the actual cash that comes in goes for dealing with most of the physical infrastructure.
Councillor Pryor.
Yeah, thanks. Well, to Patty's point on the students, I mean, is this training for students as well as research?
It is. If you look at the facilities at BCIT right now, as well as the Oasis project itself, the physical infrastructure, we have a number of simulation labs that work with the third and fourth year electrical engineering students. We actually bring in students from, quite frankly, all around the world to train on the system. So we have local partners with UBC and SFU with their engineering graduate students, but we bring in people from China, we bring in people from other areas. BCIT's mandate is for the economic development of the province. We're not just a Vancouver or a lower mainland entity, we have a province-wide mandate. And part of that economic development is supplying the HQPs, the highly qualified personnel that communities need in order to be able to take their infrastructure to the next step. It's kind of a folding of deal.
It's really, really interesting study. Now, we have lots of students from Squamish go to BCIT. I wonder if they would be informed of this type of study when they come down and go, oh, I'm going to go to BCIT. Oh, well, why don't you take this? We're even building one in Squamish.
We do a lot of that kind of marketing with the programs. A lot, as you say, a lot of the draw that brings students to BCIT from other areas is the uniqueness of some of the programs that we have. We don't tend to do things the same way as the universities do. It's more hands-on, it's more industry involved, it's more giving back to the community than some of the higher level, more theoretical university courses. So yeah, there is a lot of that goes on, whether it's our ecological restoration people and students who get involved in the electrical engineering, or there's a lot of areas with the trades involved.
Well, we do want an arm of BCIT up here someday, so I think it's a great idea. I really like it. I really like it. Thanks.
Question, beyond the obvious, I mean, we have potential for many different types of natural disasters here. I'm wondering what precipitated your sort of decision or initial outreach to Squamish as a community. Like, just trying to understand why us? Why do you want to date Squamish?
Because you're local but remote. You are of the appropriate size where this makes sense. We have numerous other projects going locally, so we work very closely with the City of Vancouver around electric vehicle systems, City of New Westminster, a lot of areas, but the needs of the Lower Mainland are different than the needs of a community like this. The original prototype of the Oasis system was for literally a remote electric vehicle gas station that BC Hydro could plunk down in the middle of the highway anywhere, and probably actually will be soon because now they have this north-south thing that they're looking at. So it was always designed to be a remote community or remote-based installation. You're also not the only partner that we have talked to remotely. We've talked to a number of First Nations communities up the coast, in the Yukon, and in the Northwest Territories. But quite frankly, you're much easier to deal with. You are more advanced in your planning stages. It was a bit opportunistic in terms of you're at a stage where you're looking at renewing some of your existing electrical infrastructure. You have got upgrades to and so it's a multiple good fit for us here. It meets a lot of the requirements, and it gives us an opportunity to move the stuff that we've been working on campus, off campus, into the community, which, as I said, BCIT is based for the economic and community development of the province. So it meets a number of our criteria to be working in Squamish.
Yeah, and certainly from my point of view, I think it meets a number of our goals, everything from our carbon marketplace to resiliency, emergency planning and response that we do share with the nation. So yeah, it certainly ticked off a bunch of my boxes as well, which I think is great. So looking to council for direction on this, I think the one thing to note is that there's no money up front. There's a bit of staff support to move the dial on this, but the no-go decision is once the feasibility study, and then we theoretically have to make a commitment probably the end of this year sometime if we're to go forward with regard to the in-kind that we're putting on the table. But I think this is a really phenomenal opportunity. You're going to move the motion?
We'll move the motion.
Moved by Councillor Spell, second by Councillor Pryor. I'll speak to Councillor Cole.
Yeah, I think this is a highly worthwhile initiative. Sorry, I have so many technical questions.
That's why I'm here.
But yeah, I think that anytime you get an opportunity to receive money or funding to look at your energy system and look at sustainability as far as emergency planning for your buildings or for your staff, it's highly worthwhile doing. And with the technical expertise of BCIT, who's already done some microgrid stuff, I think microgrids are definitely the way of the future. And even just our learnings from looking at microgrid systems and what would be feasible up here is a highly worthwhile project. So I fully support this initiative.
Yeah, and just to clarify, moving both motions, they're connected. Yeah, I agree. I think this is a great opportunity. I think it's a testament to our community and our staff and council's open-mindedness to rethink the future. We could do that. And be open to opportunities to reimagine how we provide services in our community into the future. And things are going to change dramatically, and I think this is a fantastic partnership potentially with BCIT and may lead to bigger and better things even in the future, as well as hopefully becoming a bit of a model for other communities to start exploring these opportunities. So I'm happy to support the motion. I don't see any other hands. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And I'd just like to extend the opportunity, if any of council members wish to come to BCIT and actually see the system, the Oasis system in operation, have a tour of the facilities, just contact us. You can contact us through Kate or myself directly, and we'll be happy to tour you around the facility.
We also have some brochures about the microgrid facility at BCIT if you'd just like to see those, the brochures to get an idea of what the system actually looks like and the schematics of that.
Maybe you can put one in council's room?
Absolutely, we
Okay.
do.
Thank you,
Thank
thank you very
you.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I ask maybe Chris or somebody to go get Councillor Elliott, please? Or Gary? I didn't mean to pick Chris, he was closest. Thank you, Kim.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kate.
Thank you.
Just wait for Councillor Elliott. Councillor Elliott coming?
Yes.
Okay, over to you.
Good afternoon, Council. Anushka River, Financial Analyst, and Christine Matthews, CFO. Sorry. First, still need to be here.
Not working?
Okay, should now. We're here today for Council to approve the resolution that the District of Squamish give 3 readings the District of Squamish 2018-2022 5-year plan, bylaw number 2589. Here's everybody's favorite slide. I think everybody is acquainted with it by now. With the changes that Council has requested on February 13th, the proposed taxation revenue budget has increased to $27,679,652, a 6.33% increase from 2017 taxation revenue. I just want to remind everybody that the 6.33 increase is a revenue increase, and with the growth experience, it will be dispersed over a wider assessment base in 2018. The changes from February 13th were as follow. Just please take a minute to review the list. Let me know if you have any concerns or questions.
Wasn't there one for the continuity officer?
That's the workforce plan contingency.
Oh, okay. Any questions, Councilor? Go ahead.
Is it only 19,000, sorry, the amount that we're just taking from operating and capital without taxation? Is that the other number?
I think these are only amendments from the last meeting.
That's right, but I'm just wondering how much we're taking out of the operating and capital that is outside of taxation. Number for that. 34 is that number. Where does that leave us? Is that sustainable? Like, to continue taking money out of?
Through Mayor Heinzman, there's a variety of sources of other items, so there's accumulated surplus. I think there's some contingency uses and things. We consider it. It's fine.
It's leaving, okay.
Okay.
We're good? Okay. If you want to go to your bylaw page 2 and 3, that's the printout of the current financial plan, the proposed financial plan. I will just quickly highlight a few numbers. Total operating expenses have increased 4.5% since 2017 to reach 42.6 million. The total operating revenue, totaling, sorry, 50.6 million. It's a 5.9% increase from 2017. 60% of the increase is taxation revenue, and the remaining is mainly from utility fees. With the addition of the carry forwards, the capital plan now stands at $35.6 million. There's 9 projects that have been funded from accumulated surplus for a total of $682,000. There was 3.2 million carried forward using accumulated surplus. It seems like a big number, but there's 2 million that is related to some sewer projects that were not able to be completed in 2017 and will be completed in 2018. Which is like the Buckley Lift Station and some other rehabilitation and construction projects were holded for some reasons. Taxes are not known at the moment, but we will provide council with preliminary information based on estimates of completed roll. A more fulsome review of rates and ratios is better completed when we have the revised roll. I will pass it on.
Did you want to just talk through with the utility rate changes?
Oh, okay. So the utility rates, as they were passed in December, there's a 2% increase in water, no increase for sewer rate, and between a 2.5 to 2.7% increase in waste collection, depending on the size of the tote. And like I already mentioned, we don't have like property tax rates at the moment, and we have not received the other agency tax rates.
So council, at this point, sometimes there's some trepidation about passing the bylaw, and we just wanted to remind why the financial plan, we usually try to achieve an earlier adoption of that plan. We are required to have a financial plan in place to legally expend funds. And so any of the new projects introduced into the financial plan for 2018 are not necessarily in the 2017 to 2021 financial plan. So we wouldn't technically be able to start those legally without them being adopted into the plan. This can delay and impede the strategic plan. It also, as council knows, it takes us a fair amount of time to get borrowing bylaws through. The ministry, when they do their review to accept the bylaws for borrowing, also reference our financial plan and ensure that those projects are included in that. We have a construction window that is seasonal. We need lead time for tendering and financing, and regardless of what happens today, the impacts to taxpayers, I think you're starting to understand with assessment volatility, will vary regardless. So those are just some of the quick arguments for the financial plan. As well, we understand that it was part of council's strategic direction that we deliver earlier, and we have talked to council on several occasions about how we might do that. Worst case scenario, if council is uncomfortable, when we get to the tax rates, we could amend the financial plan at that time. If council would like to, we can look a little bit at what tax rates look like for the completed roll based on what we know today. If council needs to do that in order to feel comfortable moving forward, I can put that over to the council table.
Oh, sorry. With their hands, I was still thinking.
Well, I'm curious now.
Yeah. Councilor Rees.
That's what I said, I'm curious now.
Okay. So what we'll do is we'll provide you with some information on the completed roll, and we've worked up 3 basic scenarios which we suspect would be the discussion of our April tax policy. So some of the key questions that council might have based on some of the feedback we've had thus far. Where you pose it?
And on that, I always have a little bit of trepidation approving the financial plan prior to knowing really the tax implications. We haven't talked about the pork tax, we haven't talked about different classes and different rates. And I understand wanting to get in front of the capital projects so we can get those tenders out. So it's more the operational side of the budget that I think I have trouble sort of just approving right off the bat without understanding at least contextually the tax implications.
We certainly understand that, Mayor Heinzman, and that's one of the reasons that we prepared a very high-level concept of some of the questions that we might talk about in April, just so you get a better sense of what would be the implications. Would that change what we know today? So let me walk you through a couple of the scenarios. We've provided you a handout because it is very hard to read up here. So that's just what Anushka's passing out right now. So under scenario 1, that's basically the one we've been talking to council about since January. And that's with an effective rate of about 2.76%. So this assumes 6.33% revenue requirement. It assumes that the port and all of our ratios remain the same, like the port rates remain the same, and that the ratios that we established last year to residential remain the same. And the only thing you're seeing a slight variation here, our effective rate came out to 2.76% because the port was kind enough to send me some preliminary information of what they think their depreciation and what their new build value might be. So we're very preliminarily using that information. We do expect that could change as well. But again, from order of magnitude, we think it provides a good enough illustration to council of roughly where that would look like. So under this scenario, I've highlighted just a couple that you might have some concerns with. Essentially, I know that there's been some concern about whether business and other is getting too high. So this scenario shows that business average, and again, I have to reiterate, this is statistical. It is based on essentially taking the assessment value for that entire class, dividing it by a folio count, and getting you an average business. That's as good as statistics as we can get without running this for every single business in the community to find the impact on each one. So, and that's how all of these are based. They're all based on an average folio dollar value. So what this depicts is that generally the residential would actually see about an effective 3.8% tax increase. And the single family would see about 2.34. I did just quickly look at the strata because I think strata is going to be a different scenario than residential. And it's running at about the residential rate. So they could effectively be impacted by about 3.8%. As an average over the whole, right? And I can talk about all the qualifications, but I think council's pretty familiar with the fact that every property is varies.
Familiar, but that people in the community may not be as familiar.
Sure.
It's worth saying.
So, okay, so I can stop and talk about that very briefly, but
and maybe talk a little bit about and one of the worrying lines this year is that the multifamily condo market change was more dramatic this year. And there's a greater impact on those housing forms. And currently we can't separate out residential rates within the assessment column. So maybe speak to that too as you.
Okay. Might need to take some notes. So the residential top line is for all aspects of residential. That includes vacant land, strata, a number of different categories. But to Mayor Heinzman's point, we tax across the whole class. So regardless of what's happening for each of the various components of that class, we tax and set rates for the total class. In answer to your question, the single family, and again, based on percentages, which where you have a lower base, the percentage will seem more dramatic. So if a house for 800,000 goes up 100,000 and a house for 500,000 goes up 100,000, the one that goes up 100,000 here is going to have a more dramatic percentage rate, right? So it's going to look more stunning if you just focus on the percentages. So what this scenario 1 indicates is that a single family household, based on the average folio value from last year versus the average folio value this year, would go up about $63 per annum, and would be about a 2.34% over their bill last year. The residential rate takes the whole group, but I did run very quickly against the strata line of that to see, and it compares very closely to the residential line. So your strata units are probably running at about, I think it was 3.81% change, and a $76 increase, something along that line. So just to give you, I think the top line is fairly representative of what your strata impacts will be in this model, okay? The utilities, we have sort of a set approach to those. I just highlight it because, as you can see, they're going to be impacted with 16.77% change. The port property, based on last year's rates, would see about a 0.7% change based on the information we know today, or that we're using and estimating today. We won't have that information until April from the ministry with confirmation of what's being treated as new assessment base versus what's being treated as existing infrastructure, and in terms of how each is depreciating. Okay, so those all come into play when we're trying to deal with the port rates. The light industry in theory would go down by 5.9%, and the business other would go up. It does look dramatic, it's $594,000, and the other classes would all be going down. So then,
$594,000 or $594 a year?
sorry, what was?
You said $594,000.
Yeah, sorry, $594.
A year.
Sorry, I'm used to adding 3 zeros, bear with me. In this case, it's not adding 3 zeros. So scenario 2, we thought, well, I know that council is going to be asked, and we're going to have, we've talked to the port, they've requested an opportunity to talk to council. So when we look at tax rates, we'd like to come back and in April and discuss this. If council had given last year sort of a one-time reduction in the legal cap, and the port is going to come and suggest that maybe you don't put that back this year. So I thought, well, I'll run this scenario just so you can see how that might impact your residential homeowner if we chose to put that back, okay? So if we chose to put that back, the dramatic change here, we don't change all that much in the residential piece, a little bit of a reduction. Overall, it only has about a $50,000 impact to put them back up to 27.5 tax rate. So it hurts them quite badly. They're getting hit with a $53,000 tax bill. But overall, in terms of its impact on our rates, it's, well, you can see. So there is a slight improvement to the business rate in this case because they're picking up a broader portion of the assessment base. That's basically that scenario. In scenario 3, all these scenarios are building on each other. So in scenario 3, we actually took the business ratio down by 0.1. So one of the things that we find when we do tax analysis is that the business, just taking the ratio down by 0.1 has a fairly good impact on us. You can see the effective rate went from 2.56 to 3.52%. And when we're talking the effective rate, essentially, in our modeling, we look at what did last year, what was last year's assessment base, what was last year's rates, how much would we need to increase last year's assessments and rates, or taxpayers, of all the classes to get to a new revenue level this year when we add the non-market change back on that equates to the revenue we require in our financial plan. Clear as mud? We'll call that an effective increase. So our effective increase for existing residential or existing ratepayers is closer to about 3.52% if we move the business down even 0.1. So right now the ratio is 2.8 to residential, and if we move that to 2.7, it would have this impact. So it would put the residential up to about a 4.5% increase. It would put the single family home up to about 3.09%. It would put the port property stays the same because they are now dealing with a specified rate, they're not ratioed. And the business would go down to 6.25% increase, or $396 impact. So the only real question today in terms of the financial plan scenario is, would you want to decrease your financial plan, right? So would that make it better, or would it allow you to do some of these tax policies? If you want to redistribute dramatically in any way, then you need to consider that. So scenario 4 says, well, okay, so what if we also reduce the financial plan by some amount? And in this case, I took an arbitrary amount of 100,000 just to give you sort of order of magnitude. And so yes, that would drop the business rate a little bit in terms of that. But they're still seeing an increase. The assessment on them has gone up. And so they are still seeing some impact. And it would have an effective rate reduction of about 0.4. So with that in mind, I thought, well, okay, so council's probably going to want to talk a bit more about business. So can we just move to the next slide?
I think there's some questions on this slide, so maybe we'll just pause
Sure.
for a second. Councillor Pryor and then Councillor Scott.
And wait till after we're done with
Okay.
business, so some other question is.
Well, I wish you'd break it down. If you said a business paid 5,000 last year, what would it pay this year? House paid 5,000 last year, what would it pay this year? And I can follow you, but I gotta do the math.
What that looks like.
It would make it easier.
Yeah. Okay. So I have something. Do we have the tax thing in the model in the background? I can just. I'm just going to let you look at the comparatives right now. I looked at the business ratios and the business rates for other municipalities that I think might be our competition for the businesses in this area. And so I'll let you look at how Squamish stacks up against that based on our ratio and rate if we left it the same as last year. I just want to see this. And I think Councillor, through you, Mayor Heinzman, I think to Councillor Pryor's question, the average business value is considered to be $665,500. So that's your average folio value. As you know, businesses vary wildly in that range.
6% increase.
I hope that addressed your question.
I'm not sure it did, because I think he was asking if that average business of $650,000 paid X amount last year, what are they paying this year?
Well, so sorry, that was 2017. They said was $665,500. In 2018, the average is $783,740.
So Councillor Pryor is asking, last year it was $665,000, so the average business paid.
Oh, sorry, not what they paid. That's their.
That's what I think you were asking. wasn't it?
Okay.
Yeah, just to make it simple.
$8,000, and this year it's 8,000 plus 6.
Yeah, sorry, wrong amount or wrong information. So in 2017, they paid this average would have paid $6,333 for their business, and this year they'd be paying $6,702.
Does that help for Councillor Pryor?
Yeah, that way it helps lots.
Councillor Spell, did you want to go in right now?
Yeah, I just, thank you. I wonder how this relates to economic development when we're in our region struggling because of lack of access to places to work. And with 40% of our population still commuting to Vancouver, and I would expect it to actually be higher now because we still haven't built any comprehensive workplaces, even though we're moving towards that in a really positive way. We still don't have economic development, and the businesses that are here are struggling with high rents, and also the increase, I think, will be higher than what you expect the average to be. I mean, the increase in the space is going to be now related to higher agglomeration of properties. So I'm just wondering if moving towards something like the Pemberton rate, where they're looking at keeping jobs locally, and what the relationship is to the amount of employment locally and the multiplier. I never really understood a business multiplier because it's the residents that use the majority of the services. So
do you have and this is I think a little bit of the jeopardy of getting too deep into the tax rate conversation without all the information in front of us. But we wanted to make sure council had a context to make a determination on the financial plan, because that's technically what's in front of council, is the financial plan, not the tax rate bylaw. Do we have and this leads into Councillor Chappelle's question about economic growth, do we have an understanding of, we know how many more residents we have and some revenue in residences, do we have an understanding of increased business growth and or not?
As well as tax incentives, in what areas are we still tax incentivized? When is that coming on board? Is that?
Well, I don't believe we've only signed two tax.
Right, this is part of it.
But only portions of it.
That's right.
Yeah.
But when that's coming online and.
Yeah. And we'll have all that information for the actual tax rate conversation. We're not going to get to it today.
And I'm happy to support today. I really.
One of the things that I talked about with Christine was if council wanted to give third reading, but make a list of things that we didn't want staff to act on in case we come back with the tax rate bylaw and we choose to reduce the spending. And that we sort of put a couple of initiatives on deck. It's really the capital projects that are imperative that we want to get moving. But anyway, so that's an option for council. Councilor Pratt.
Okay, thanks. So somebody has a house, and they pay their taxes, and they have a business, and they pay their taxes. Which is the best benefit for them? Their business taxes to be less and their residential taxes to be more, or?
I'm sorry, Mayor Hanson, I can't even answer that. That's above my.
We're going to have a whole tax rate conversation. This was just to give council a ballpark of where we're at, so
Well,
they can make the financial plan decision.
It would change the way I look at raising and lowering the business taxes, knowing that.
And that's a tax rate conversation. We're going to have that conversation in the future.
And I believe it's a bit of a philosophical question for council, honestly.
For residences and their business, but if someone
There
has a business and they have employees and they're paying house and residents, whatever's the best for them.
We'll bring that answer back to the tax rate bylaw.
I will try. So we've had 157 new businesses. I believe that was one of the questions. So the folio count has gone up by 157. So far, we seem to still be attracting businesses.
How many residences?
It went up by... Oh, sorry, it's all, this one I need. And residences are loosely defined by, it includes vacant land, so subdivisions and things would also impact these, right? So 199. That seems a little low, but I'll look at.
We'll get the revised one, the
Yeah.
final one. Councillor Spell and Councillor Grace.
How many brick and mortar, was that home-based businesses included?
I have no idea right now.
Yeah. So
Honestly,
I think
council, I'm really,
relevant.
I don't have the revised roll, so we have not done a substantial amount.
It's
of
not
review of
business
this.
licenses, it's folios, so it's not generally home-based businesses.
Unless their
It's
houses,
impossible to differentiate right now, because we don't really know.
their house would have to be assessed for.
It has to have an assessed value.
It
so-
would have had to have been added in as a class 6 for that property for it to register here, so.
Yeah.
So if they're working out their home and BC Assessment doesn't know that, there's more businesses out there. But business licensing might be a way for us to figure that out.
Get a different number, yeah.
Yeah.
Councillor Reyes?
Yeah, thanks. So my curiosity, at least for this discussion, has been satisfied because I think the difference to our financial plan that is before us is category 4 or scenario 4, reducing it. And speaking for myself, I don't see the need to consider that. I'm happy to approve the financial plan as presented. And in the next discussion, we'll bounce back and forth between scenario 1, 2, and 3. Or variations on that. So to Councillor Pryor's point, all else being equal, it would be better to raise the business taxes than the residential taxes because those are tax deductible and residential taxes are not. So you can pile it on if you want, but then you're affecting everybody. So anyway, I'll just leave it at that. I'm happy to approve the financial plan.
So, realizing that the tax rate bylaw and the whole discussion is coming forward, any more questions on it that people need to make a decision on the financial plan? All right, let's move on.
So assuming council is comfortable with that, then March 6th, we would bring the bylaw back for financial plan adoption, and April 10th is our finance and audit usual time slot, so that is likely the time frame when we would bring back the financial plan, or the opportunity to really get into this tax discussion more wholesomely with council. If there's any key things you'd like us to bring back, perhaps you'd like to let us know, but I think after that, we would be bringing a tax rates bylaw April 17th for first three.
Any questions about the financial plan, five-year financial plan bylaw? Don't see anyone. Does anyone want to move the staff recommendation? Moved by Councillor Elliott, seconded by Councillor Pryor. Anyone want to speak to it? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? I'm sorry, I didn't see you. Councillor, before I call the question, Councillor Stahl, go ahead.
I totally agree with Councillor Race in saying that this is, I feel totally fine passing this, but I think the discussion on businesses and economic development, we do it in isolation of economic development. We don't really weigh the effect on businesses. I don't think we go to businesses and ask them. We don't do engagement specifically for businesses and say, is this going to put you under? You know, and I think that we've had multipliers every single year without really consulting the business community on our budget, except for in general. So I think really, if we're going to continue with the multiplier of 2.8, and I look forward to the discussion on that, because I do think that our businesses are suffering with increase, the same as Vancouver's businesses are suffering. Our multiplier is really difficult while we incentivize some areas and don't incentivize our local businesses, and our small and medium-sized businesses are suffering in this economy. So I really do look forward to the conversation, but I am happy to support it to move forward and have that conversation on distribution of rates later on.
And through you, Mayor Heinzman, just to be clear, we do open up the public consultation process to everybody. And we did receive one or two letters, I believe, from businesses, so then they did express that concern. Also, I believe in the survey questions, we framed it so that there was some specific information around, where there's been a recent survey done by Communications that framed some business questions as well. So I just didn't want the business community to think that we're neglecting them. But
I guess that's a matter
I'll call the question.
We disagree.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And we'll have an opportunity to have that conversation. All right, moving on. We have one more item on the agenda. This is development permit number 483, lot 58, Legacy Ridge.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. My name is Caroline Ashikian. I'm the Environmental Coordinator with the District and a professional biologist. I'm here tonight to present development permit number 483. The subject property of this development permit is located on the north side of Mamquam Road and east of the Aristotle subdivision in University Heights. An unnamed watercourse, which shall be referred to as Northern Channel, is located along the northern boundary of the property. A development permit for development permit areas 9 and 11 are required for development on these lands. The objective of development permit area 9 is to regulate form and character of residential development within the university lands, and through which DP number 464 was approved July 25th of last year. The objective of DP area 11 is for protection of riparian areas and is the subject of this DP before you today. The Northern Channel is described as a non-fish-bearing tributary to Masheter Creek, which Masheter Creek is a fish-bearing watercourse. All lands in Squamish within 30 meters of a watercourse, whether it is fish-bearing or not, are within development permit area 11. This means that proposed development or land clearing activities requires a development permit as well as a riparian assessment to establish the width of the riparian buffer area. The riparian buffer can be anywhere from 2 meters to 30 meters, and according to the provincial riparian areas regulation, the buffer can be established by one of two methodologies called the simple assessment or the detailed assessment. And further, the district's development permit area 11 guidelines specify which assessment method is to be used. The development application before us is subject to a simple assessment with the option to vary the riparian buffer through a buffer averaging approach, which is also being requested in this development application. So based on a simple assessment, a simple riparian assessment, the riparian buffer area would be 30 meters wide, which is shown by the dotted line on the screen. Buffer averaging was requested to accommodate steep topography and the requirement for retaining walls and geotechnical safety, mainly in the area that's shaded blue. And so the request is to reduce the riparian buffer from 30 meters down to 20 meters at the northwest of the site, which is that blue area, and increase the riparian buffer area to somewhere between 40 and 45 meters, which is the darker green area at the lower end of the screen. So it would be a total of 672 square meters lost, a total of 997 square meters gained, which is a 59% increase in functional riparian habitat. Also, the area that would be lost is environmentally considered somewhat less valuable. It's had previous land disturbance. It's young forest with sparse vegetation, whereas the area that will be gained is mature vegetation, mature forest that's more biodiverse. They both have similar topography, similar slope. There is also a stormwater outfall that's being proposed at the north end of the site. Installation of stormwater outfalls into watercourses are regulated by the province under the Water Sustainability Act. And however, the riparian area impacts and the associated revegetation that will be required are regulated under this development permit. So vegetation removal associated with the construction of the stormwater outfall will be kept to a minimum and the area will be revegetated. The applicant is required to provide bonding in the amount of $16,500. Primarily for riparian restoration and revegetation. Legislated and district processes for engagement were followed for this application. Project details were available through the online development showcase, and no requests for a public information meeting were received, and no public comments were received. The proposal conforms with the Development Permit Area 11 guidelines as described in Attachment 2 of the report before you. And therefore, staff recommend that Council approve Development Permit number 483, subject to the provision of bonding for riparian protection and enhancement work in the amount of $16,500. Any questions?
Council Carr.
So we're getting 40,000 square feet for 16,000 square feet, something like that. I forget the numbers. Looking at the aerial here, I guess the property that we're getting is similar topographical type of habitat.
That's right. It's through you, Mayor. The topography is similar. The slope is similar in both areas. So I've put the map on the screen. So the blue area is what's being lost, and the darker green area at the lower end is what's being gained.
Obviously, you've been up there.
I have.
Yeah, and so it's a good trade.
It's a good trade.
Councillor Stone.
Thanks, and I pretty much have the same question. I've never really understood trading riparian areas, because you're taking a square foot of one geophysical space and basically saying it's another one, but it looks like it's not a bad trade.
And it's through you, Mayor. It's every site will be somewhat different, so it's not always going to be. I mean, sometimes it's like for like, so it's just reducing the buffer in one area and increasing it in another. So when you take the average, it averages out to 30 meters.
So when the buffer's there for a reason, like the physical buffer is 30 meters for a reason, because you don't want too much runoff or trading space. So when you're reducing the buffer, there's an effect. Is it directly compensated by that other area?
It's a form of compensation. I mean, through you, Mayor, it's true that in one area the buffer is reduced, however in the other area it's increased. There may be some impact associated with that, but overall, it's an approach that's used by other local governments as well.
Yes.
It's an approach that has been within our Development Permit Area 11 guidelines since they were written and adopted several years back.
Is it a local government? Is it a local government, or is it a provincial government that we manage, like setbacks and riparian areas?
Local government.
Can I follow up with one more question? So the whole idea in our area guidelines, I don't mind this in particular. I think that's totally reasonable, and the suggestion is fine. But I think in general, trading one area for another area has different, the physical properties of a riparian area are set for a reason, to protect the riparian area. And when you start encroaching on an area and then trying to increase in a different area, I think that's worth looking at, because we often do trades of areas that actually do have high impact, and then we take another area that may not behave the same way environmentally and try and put it in another area that may have no value whatsoever. So I just think in general, it's something that's maybe worth looking at in our bylaws, because there's such differences in different riparian areas, and I think oftentimes we're trading areas for that actually decrease the protection and the reason that those areas are there in the first place.
Did you want to answer that? Go ahead.
Through you, Mayor. So within our guidelines, this riparian buffer averaging approach is only available on larger greenfield sites, where presumably there's more space to actually do buffer averaging, so reduce in one area and increase in another. Also, there's a requirement that it be justified on the basis of a hardship. So in this case, it's the topography of the site at the rear end.
Looks like a hardship.
Well, which is, I mean, it does get explicit in our guidelines in terms of what's considered or what would be acceptable justification for a hardship, and topography is listed there.
Excellent, thank you. Excellent work.
Councillor Elliott.
For my own peace of mind, how do we keep track of areas set aside for compensation? So like that piece that's now buffered to 45, how do we make sure that always stays that? Is it registered on title? How do we track that?
Through you, Mayor, there are a few different ways. So in this case, it's registered on title through this development permit. There's also often a requirement for fencing and signage, as is the case here. Also, we use conservation covenants as a tool in some cases, and in other cases, the land is transferred to the district.
Another question is, you mentioned in your report that we were getting better land in this compensation, that the land had been previously disturbed. But disturbed by what? Is this a new development?
Through you, Mayor, looking back through our air photos, like looking back through more than a decade ago, it appears that the area was cleared back then, and so that was the disturbance. Clearing of the site, and I'm not sure what the reason was.
And finally, I guess as we're looking to update our subdivision control bylaw and looking at stormwater, stormwater has to go somewhere, and we don't want it to go through our wastewater treatment plant. But are these kinds of stormwater outfalls to streams like this best practice, or should we be looking at dissipating it some other means?
Take a first crack at that. Okay, through you, Mayor. Typically on sites, staff encourage proponents to look to other means before they consider this type of option. So it's more of a last resort. In this case, it's only the 3 lots at the north end of the subdivision whose stormwater will be discharged to that water course. Did you have anything else to add?
I would only add that we do have the integrated stormwater management plan, and we'll be looking at a catchment basin by catchment basin over the coming years on how to handle stormwater. We do look for on-site infiltration as a first option. Other developments will have a stormwater management pond. It's really very, very site specific. And obviously the last option is to put it into a sensitive area, and that is subject to permitting by the province.
Thank you.
I'm going to go and then Councillor Hart. The area of the property that isn't under development, is there development potential there? Are we going to expect to see a subdivision in the area within this property line in the future?
Can you clarify which, you mean just uphill from this subdivision?
Yeah, on page 14 of the report of the agenda, there's the property line is outlined in red. Most of the compensated area, which isn't on this, this map, most of the compensated area is in this undeveloped portion. Or a good chunk of it. Is that developable in the future? I'm trying to understand the benefit of getting a riparian area in an area that isn't going to be developed anyway and would remain as is anyway. And why would we just not make the cul-de-sac 10 meters shorter and do it that way rather than do a compensation that, I don't see, I'm trying to understand the value proposition in what's being presented.
My understanding is that phase 2, that second portion of the site is developable.
And so this compensation area would come into that development, and so they wouldn't be able to go into this compensation.
Yes,
It looks pretty darn steep, so I'm not sure they're gonna develop there anyway, but.
Yeah, this was considered, and my understanding is that that area of the site is developable, and so that was considered when this request for buffer averaging came before us. Also, what was considered is of course the quality of the habitat as well. There were some questions around that earlier, so.
If we stuck to the 30-meter riparian area, are those last, I suspect one of them is, are those two smaller lots at the end of the cul-de-sac, can you build a house on that?
My understanding was that because of the topography and because of the need to build retaining walls for geotechnical stability is that they would not be developable.
Thanks. Councilor Pratt.
That's an excellent point, Mayor.
Shocking, I know.
Well, I mean, I thought because this property's already got a DP, we're done. We've already gave a DP. I did think we should have known the riparian area before the subdivision. And the subdivision's in, so as long as we're getting better at that, I'm okay. Until I heard Mayor Heisman say, are we getting habitat that we're going to get in the next development anyway through the setbacks? So we're going, oh, we'll give you this habitat, and then now we're going to do this development, and it's already habitat. We get it anyway, so maybe we should be looking at habitat elsewhere in exchange and get some value elsewhere rather than on an adjoining piece of property where we're going to get it anyway. I didn't think of that at first.
Just to clarify, it's the new piece isn't within the riparian area. So we wouldn't get it through a riparian setback. It's outside of that. Correct?
Correct, yes, it's outside of that. So certainly there is riparian area that's being gained. It's,
I didn't get that.
And I would just add that staff have looked at this holistically. We were aware that the second phase is likely to come and is in fact in process now, and we're looking at the entire parcel holistically.
There's 2 added development lots are $1 million. So somebody's got a nice benefit.
Maybe a question through to Gary as the approving officer. When an approving officer looks at something like this, would they not consider the 30-meter buffer as part of the consideration of approving a subdivision?
Yes, the PLR that's been issued on this site requires the issuance of this permit. So if this permit doesn't get issued as proposed, then they'll be doing some revisions to the subdivision plan.
Council Pryor had said that the subdivision was done, and
We have issued a PLR, but the PLR does have a requirement that the issuance of this DP11 permit is done, provided by council. In whatever form that happens, they will or will not have to change the subdivision layout.
Councilor.
So I'm trying to figure, when we look at our DPA 11, at the forefront, are you thinking about protecting riparian habitat? Or is it, because this is about maximizing the developable area versus just saying it's 30 meters is 30 meters. Because if you took off the 2 lots at the front, there'd be enough room to just shift everything forward and maintain a 30 meter.
Through you, Mayor. The buffer averaging approach is permitted in our guidelines as a consideration on sites where there may be hardships. So allowing the reduction in one area and an increase in another. Certainly the main objective of the DP Area 11 guidelines is protection of riparian habitat. So in crafting the guidelines at the time, years ago when they were crafted, it was based on the philosophy that this type of buffer averaging approach would not constitute a major detrimental impact to the riparian area, provided that there were some checks and balances in place. I mean, there's consideration taken into what's being lost and what's being gained, but that overall the integrity of the riparian habitat remains or improves.
Can I just ask why these two don't come forward at the same time? How you can make a holistic decision?
Through you, Mayor, typically that's the approach that is recommended to all applicants. In this case, the riparian report was not received with the application, and they were taken forward so therefore the development permits are being brought forward and at two separate times. Most of the time they're done together, and that's certainly what's permitted in the guidelines, but also permitted in the guidelines is that two permits are brought forward at different times as standalone DPs.
I'm wondering if you could just give me an understanding of the size of these lots. You zoom in, it just gets blurry. And I see maybe the proponents are in the room, and I'm wondering if I can ask them a question about how the subdivision was drawn and whether that extra 10 meters is really necessary for the subdivision. But
I don't have the size.
it looks like between 470 and 420. It's just really blurry.
Yeah.
I'd say 8,000. Yeah.
8,000?
You recognize that those lots go right out, you know what I mean? That all the green areas.
Some of them are long and skinny.
Yeah.
Yeah, some are in the 500 range, but they're long and skinny, and others are
Those
short.
ones are big because of the challenge of the site.
Like, could you get the same amount of lots by pulling the whole subdivision 10 meters that way?
There's no area range.
Oh, yeah, you're gonna have to come up. Sorry, Carol.
Don't you see my name?
Yeah, sorry, thanks.
Carolyn Lamont. I'm with Legacy Ridge Developments. Yeah, there you can see. So the first lots, just the square lots, are about 6,000 square feet. And we did try. It was actually the reason there's a delay has to do more with the geotech. So as we worked through the development permit, through that process, and as the district required geotechnical requirements, we did find out that even though the building footprint would be outside of the 30 meter, the retaining wall wouldn't be. So that's the purpose of the variance. And if at all possible, I'd be happy to answer some other questions. I think the staff report was very well done, but I wouldn't, if I had a chance, I would speak to a couple other things. That's okay?
Yep.
Okay, right now, when the property was purchased, there is a covenant on it, and you actually can see it. Caroline, are you able to point where that existing riparian on the Aristotle subdivision is? So Aristotle was required, or whatever, never say that other philosopher's name. That street, that setback is 15 meters. So right now they're allowed to build within 15 meters of that creek. When we went on site, it's really evident, and I think it is in your package, as Caroline mentioned, there was disruption, but that was a road. A road used to go across right at the corner of the lot where we're requesting the variance. So you could see that on the air photo. So it wasn't just clearing as part of all of the university development. It was actually a specific road that went over that creek. So that's why when staff mentions that the quality of the area you're getting on the upper level is better, that's primarily why. It's a beautiful older forest when you go up there. And I think, okay, I answered the developable. The outfall is an approval through the provincial government, which our consultant did get. The cul-de-sac, I think we talked about that, and the geotech. So I think those are just some of the points I wanted to mention. If we weren't given the variance, you couldn't put the 3 lots in there, and we'd have to rearrange that somehow, but it would lose probably 2 to 3 residential units. That's it.
Yep, go through this.
Yep, and this lot, Lamont, do you mind going back? Just,
Yeah.
sorry. So somebody raised the question about phase 2, which I take it is that the part below what we're talking about.
Which should be above, but yes.
Yeah.
Below on
It's
the
higher.
diagram,
That's to the
higher
west
up,
of,
yeah.
or east.
So in the report, there's a couple of diagrams showing another road running along the property line with a cul-de-sac at the end of it. It looks like the whole thing backs onto a hydro right away. So there's just the road with cul-de-sac and lots on the top side as opposed to both sides like there is in the one we're looking at. And when I look at this, if we can go to the slide that shows the compensation piece. Yeah, so when I try to scale it off, and believe me, this is very unscientific, but it looks like the way it's diagrammed, there's going to be an issue with how close the proposed cul-de-sac is in that second phase to the new additional riparian area. So you might have to pull the whole subdivision back a little bit anyway in the second phase. So the only reason I'm mentioning that is I think if we're asked to go along with this, what I don't expect to see with the next phase is an application to reduce that new area. You will have to live with that buffer.
Absolutely, and because of that area and the recognition in other reports about the importance of that area, we have pushed, that cul-de-sac has pushed back from some of the earlier versions that we did.
Okay, thank you.
Well, just to, this is like asking for forgiveness rather than permission. Sometimes you don't know this, but if you go to the other subdivision plan, it shows the whole subdivision plan. You take the first 2 lots off the entrance there and move the whole development 20 meters to the south, you don't have a problem. You lose 2 lots, there's no problem. So if we agree to the variance, somebody's making some pretty good money. So,
Just to clarify, it's not a variance.
no,
Correct, it's not a variance.
if we allow the variant exchange, there's a financial gain that nobody knew about in the beginning, but we all know about now. And so, I mean, trading riparian, when I look at the aerial photos and I see the power lines going in there and I can see the road at the next one, yes, we're getting habitat on the existing subdivision that's we're going to get anyway regardless. And then we get a bit more on this that looks like an old road bed. But I guess the point I'm trying to make is there any way of getting, we need a new ice rink, we need a new city hall, we need a new, we need a lot of stuff. And there's a financial gain of 2 lots. Gary's pissed at me.
I'm going to have Linda respond.
Mayor Heinzman, thank you. Issuance of a development permit does not provide council any opportunity to negotiate CACs.
Although I've been told we could say no. And the proponent has an opportunity to come back and offer more of an amenity.
We can only say no within the parameters of the development permit.
That's right. And that's it.
Within the parameters of the development, you can say no. Yeah.
It's just my point.
Yeah, go ahead.
And Mayor Huntsman, in terms of leveraging this to have the developer come back with offers, again, that's through the rezoning negotiation process, not a development permit. There's no opportunity at the development permit stage to require or
Required
ask of the
or
developer.
ask, but the proponent still can come back.
I believe it's after 6 months or a year. I'd have to ask Mr. Buxton.
I'd be curious about that.
They can't come back with the same plan after 6 months, but they could come back with a modified plan sooner, with a different proposal.
Compensation.
Thank you.
And I'm not even sure a reduction of 2 lots would be necessary. You make every lot a foot narrower, and we could probably get that area, and you'd be spending less on pavement for the road anyway. I'm not 100% sure why they're just not designing it to fit within the 30-meter buffer, and maybe there's a really good reason. Yeah, come on up.
There is, with the cul-de-sac, it cuts into the grade, particularly on the downside, which is the upside. And so if you push that back, it actually would hinder access to other lots, making access more difficult to those lots. So it's part of a bigger engineering puzzle, per se.
Okay, thanks, that's helpful, thank you. Any more questions? Don't see any. There was a proposed motion in front of council. Moved by Councillor Chappelle, seconded by Councillor Race. Councillor Chappelle, do you want to speak to it?
I just think this is reasonable considering the options. I don't think that there's anything really, I trust our biologists basically in saying that that we're getting a better outcome with the trade. And and I thank you to the proponent for explaining more about the project.
Councillor Race?
Thank you. Yeah, particularly in light of the buffer that's in the subdivision west, which is above it on the diagram. I think this is consistent with that, and so I don't see a problem with this. I think these riparian buffers are set to, they almost ask to be adjusted depending on local circumstances, and I think this is one of those instances where that's appropriate. And I have to say that, I'm happy to negotiate amenities on a rezoning, but this is not a rezoning. And I don't think it's appropriate to do that. And I think, there are guidelines. This district has been sued before on DP applications. And so we have to be careful about that, where they can fit within the guidelines. Otherwise, I think it's just a form of bad governance. But happy to negotiate them on a rezoning, but this is not what that's in front of us.
Councillor Buckingham?
I'm not going to be supporting this permit. I don't think I don't think it's met the test of hardship for the developer. I understand why an applicant would want to maximize as much as possible the developable area in the subdivision. But I think in this case, that revolves around potentially considering a different design. So I think the riparian areas are there for a very important reason, and the more that we approve exceptions to the rule, the more that it will encourage other applications of similar nature, which kind of undermines the general thrust of the proposals and the policy.
Thanks. Councillor Coyle, Councillor.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to support it partially as a protest that it's after the fact, and our procedure didn't pick this up in the beginning, and I like the idea of, when I first came in today, I thought, well, that's just a sound that works, done, the subdivision's done, and I was supportive of the thing. But to Councillor Race's point about being sued because we don't follow a process, I don't think that if we don't support this, then we're not following process. But I would like to see a new ice rink someday, and whatever that means and whatever I'm saying, and all staff are shaking their head at me.
It's not a consent.
Oh, you shouldn't do that, you can't do that, and I think, so mine's protesting the fact that it's after the fact that we're getting it, and I wouldn't mind seeing a little bit of an amenity for us getting in on this.
I'm not going to support this DP, and I think it's a good lesson for me in the future when we see building DPs that are not coming forward with their riparian area DP. I don't think I see hardship here. I think there's developable land there, and if they'd come forward together, I certainly would have had a lot more questions about whether we could have avoided that outfall by respecting the riparian area setback of 30 meters, which would have pushed all the housing forward, and perhaps we would have found another way to avoid having that outfall. So I just think there's a lot of outstanding questions, and I think there's still room to move with that lot without getting a 20-meter buffer.
Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Schwab.
So it's our policy. This is within our policy. It's not going outside our policy, which is why I'm supporting it. I don't disagree with the naysayers that this should have been seen before, but I do disagree with things that aren't really, you know, that we're actually within our policy getting back riparian area that is better than our other. There was a road going through, you can see the access. And I just think that, you know, going back on a proponent because we missed something where it's our policy that states that this is possible and can come back. And it's been assessed by a professional biologist, and it's a good trade. But just proving a point, which is sort of under our provision to catch it in the first place, if there's things like that needed. Sometimes these things are overlooked, and it's unfortunate, but you know, this proposal in front of us is not a bad proposal. So I think that just voting it down for the sake of making a point to other developers is not fair to the proponent that's in front of us. And whether I disagree or agree with the way it came back, the proposal that is in front of me is a sound proposal. So I think supporting it is a reasonable thing to do, considering the policy.
Yeah, I'll speak to it. From a policy point of view, I agree it's acceptable within our policy framework. So on that basis, I'm going to vote in favor of the application. But I do have concerns about how we got to where we are, and I think that's maybe the learning lesson here for council and staff is making sure that we're getting information that's valuable to decision making at the right time. And to be perfectly blatant, we have no ability to make a protest vote on DP applications. At least you can't articulate it that way. Council needs a rationale within the DP framework to vote against it, not simply I want to make a point, but that's actually not a rationale. So council has to make a decision based within the framework of the policy, and they have every right to vote against it on that basis, and they have every right to vote for it on that basis. However, I'm going to support it because it does, I think Councillor Chappelle articulated it clearly, it does fit within our framework. On that basis, I'm going to support it. Councillor Pryor.
Well, I guess I better rephrase it because I'm not allowed to protest, so nobody knew about the riparian area when they drew the subdivision. And they brought the subdivision forward to council, and we voted on it and we supported it. And then the riparian came in after that. No?
Barry, we don't vote on subdivisions. Can you please clarify?
No, you took a form and character and you made some comments on that. The plan was changed, the approving officer approves the subdivision.
Knowing that the riparian area was there?
there was a condition attached to the preliminary outline approval that requires this process to go through. So no, it wasn't approved, go do what you want, it was go get a right at a DP11.
But did the approving officer know there was habitat there before it was approved?
Yes, and we required them to get a DP11.
That's why they required them to get the DP11. Everybody knew there was a DP11 required. That was never a surprise or a last-minute analysis.
Through you, Mayor, I believe that I believe that there was mention of it in the previous council report as well when the previous development permit for form and character was brought forward. It was identified that there is a riparian area at the north end of this site and that development permit area 11 would be required.
The river's been there a long time. We've known about the riparian area for a long time.
And just to add to that, I don't want there to be, there seems to be some impression that this was missed or came in at the last minute, or this staff and the proponent have been talking about this buffer averaging from the beginning. It was written into the PLR, and it was, you know, at the applicant's risk that this could be turned down, but it wasn't missed, and it's not coming last minute, and it's not contradicting what was put forth by the PLR. It is later in the game than we would have liked, but I don't want there to be an impression that this was underhanded or a mistake or anything like that.
So we didn't know, it might have been 5 feet, we didn't know what it was going to be, we just knew it was there. Staff knew it was there.
Through the mayor, we knew it was there. We knew that the proponent would be asking for buffer averaging, and we had reviewed and knew that we would be recommending that buffer averaging, but we didn't know the outcome of this meeting today, so that's why it was written with PLR as it was, as contingent upon council's decision.
So that's where the rub is. If we're doing development and there's subdivisions involved, and we know that's got to come out before we approve what we approve.
We haven't approved anything. We approved a DP, and it was known that it would need a DP11 at the time of the previous DP. We, the subdivision officer, approving officer, approved the PLA, with the condition of a DP11, knowing that it was needed. So there's no surprises here. This, you know, I think you're creating a situation that doesn't actually exist.
I'm just not paying attention.
Yeah, come on.
Well, anyway.
You don't have the floor. Carolyn, go ahead.
I think there's a presumption that there was bad faith on our part, that we were hiding it, and I tried to mention it before, and I think Gary and Caroline were involved in it. The building envelope is not within the riparian area. It was once we got more detailed geotech that we found that the retaining wall would need to be in it. The house building envelope would not, so it wasn't until after the form of character, which is typical for subdivision, that you get the geotech. So I really hope that you don't think that we came upon this and sort of slid it through on the form and character, because that was not the case. It was with the geotech report.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I'm going to have to switch and support staff.
Okay, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Elliott, Councillor Blackman, opposed. Motion carries. Thank you very much. We are at number 5, which is some resolutions from this morning's committees to send resolutions to the Mainland Local Government Association. There's 3 in there. I'm going to look for a motion to approve all 3 to go to LMOJ, so I don't have to read them all out.
If I can speak?
Yeah, go ahead. What's going to move? Let's put them on the table.
No, I want to change one.
Okay, yep.
So with respect to the last one, removal of restrictive covenants, it reads presently that EBCM petitioned the province to include a similar provision in the Land Title Act, RSPC, etc., to the Alberta legislation. I don't think it is the Land Title Act, and so what I suggest the wording be is that UBCM petition the province to include a similar provision in provincial legislation to Section 48.4 of the Land Title Act of Alberta. And that leaves it open. I think it's actually a different statute that actually has that provision in it. So rather than get too involved in that, I'm making it just a little bit more general to allow it to grow however it goes.
Yeah, I think that's fine. It's capturing the intent of what we're trying to do.
Exactly.
We can always do the homework to make sure that we're crossing all our T's, dotting all our I's. And we can speak to that specifically as we present the resolution at LNG.
So with that change, I'll move the three of them.
Moved by Councillor Race, second by Councillor Chappell. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Motion to terminate, moved by Councillor Blackton-Wolf, second by Councillor Pryor. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.